Joining us now to talk more about the fight to fund the federal government is Virginia Rep. James Walkinshaw. Thanks so much for being with us again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So how do you plan on voting on this bill? Because some Democrats, of course, voted with the Republicans, and that's really created a very large schism in the party.
Yeah, so when I learned about the bill 2 nights ago, I sat down and read it, woke up the next morning, looked at it again, and released a statement yesterday and said that I'll be a no vote on the Republican plan, the Republican budget plan. And look, I want to end the shutdown. I want our federal workers to be treated with dignity by the Trump administration. I want them to get their paychecks. But I also want to address the healthcare affordability crisis that my constituents are facing, and I've heard that from them time and time again. And my fear is that Speaker Johnson will refuse to even allow a vote in the House on legislation to extend the ACA premium tax credits and prevent healthcare premiums from doubling or in some cases tripling. So the deal that was struck in the Senate isn't good enough for me, and I'll be voting against it, but I'll also be working over the course of this week to try to get a vote in the House to extend those ACA premium tax credits.
Well, to that point, what is, or are there any bipartisan conversations happening? We've heard Republicans say that they have a health care plan. The speaker himself has said that. Have you seen any sort of plan beyond just, hey, let's give everybody health savings accounts and allow them to spend the money that they want to, the way that they want on their health care?
Look, congressional Republicans passed the largest cut to health care in American history this year with the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that cut $1 trillion from Medicaid and could lead to cuts to Medicare as well. They have no plan to make health care more affordable. They have a scattering of different ideas and bills that have been proposed, but they have no plan. And right now, there's an urgent crisis with the ACA premium tax credits expiring. And if they're allowed to expire, it will drive up healthcare premiums for everyone. So we need to extend those tax credits. I'm willing to compromise in terms of how long that extension could be and use that time to talk about other ways to make healthcare more affordable in America. But we have an urgent crisis right now, and it needs to be addressed.
What other ways are there?
Well, look, in the Inflation Reduction Act, Democrats and President Biden worked together to allow Medicare for the first time in history to negotiate for a small number of prescription drug categories. And we now have seen that significantly bring down the cost of those prescription drugs. We should expand ideas like that. Republicans are enthusiastic about expanding health savings accounts, and I'm all for health savings accounts. They tend to work for wealthier folks and wealthier families, not really working people who might be making $50,000 or $60,000 a year. We need to do a better job of, preventive care and getting people access to services before they get sick and helping to address chronic illnesses. I think all those things can be on the table, but right now we urgently have to prevent healthcare premiums from skyrocketing, because if people lose their coverage, they won't get that preventive care. They'll still get sick, they'll still get injured, and they'll have to show up at the emergency room, which drives up the cost of care for everybody.
So in this bill from the Senate, there's money to fund military construction, veteran affairs, the Department of Agriculture, which is SNAP, in the legislative branch. It also has protections for federal workers, keeping them from being riffed. You represent about 55,000 federal workers. If you're a no on this vote, are we to believe that the healthcare piece of this outweighs all of those protections for those federal workers who you represent?
No, my other concern with the legislation is it doesn't do enough to protect federal workers. It does two things. One, it restores the 4,000 jobs that were illegally eliminated at the beginning of the shutdown. It's worth noting that the courts have already determined that those firings were illegal and have halted them. I welcome the legislation if it passes, providing extra certainty for that, but the courts have already ruled on that. It does prevent rifts until January 30th of 2026. So it temporarily prevents rifts, but it does not prevent the Trump administration from continuing to slash federal programs through rescissions packages. It does not prevent the Trump administration from continuing to illegally impound or refuse to spend dollars that have been appropriated on federal programs or federal jobs. So I don't think it provides enough protections for federal workers.
Let me ask you something that a lot of people have been talking about, at least some of the people I know. There's so much pain from the shutdown. You've talked about some of it. It's happening to your constituents. The House hasn't been in session for more than 50 days. Why should Congress members be paid?
I don't think they should be. I voluntarily had my pay withheld, or I've had my pay withheld throughout the shutdown. So I missed a paycheck earlier this month, just as federal workers have. The Constitution and the law do, I think, probably require that members of Congress get paid. I just didn't think it was right given what my constituents are going through. So I won't be paid until the shutdown is over, just like my constituents who work for the federal government.
All right, so let's say, this CR passes through the House, the government reopens. What is next on the agenda for the House of Representatives? I assume Adelita Grijalva will ultimately be sworn in. And beyond the Epstein stuff, because I know that's a big talking point in Washington, what else are you all working on in the House that will actually improve people's lives and make a difference in their daily lives?
Well, look, I think the most urgent issue will be to try to pass the 9 appropriations bills that are not included in this package, and to try to do that before January 30th, 2026, when this new CR expires, assuming that it passes this week. And my hope is that'll be a bipartisan process in a way that the process has not been bipartisan to date in the House of Representatives, at least. So I hope that we can do that. I think we need to be focused, especially given the long paid vacation that Speaker Johnson has had the House and Republicans on. We need to be focused on the everyday cost of living issues that American people are facing. So we need to push back and against the tariffs that are driving up costs. We need to address healthcare affordability. We need to address energy costs, which are skyrocketing again because of some of the measures in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. I think the Virginians and folks in New Jersey and elections across the country told us last Tuesday they want us to focus on those issues. So I think we need to buckle down and focus on those issues.
Congressman, given everything that we've gone through, not just recently, but for years now, does the two-party system in this country work?
Wow, that is a big question for early in the morning.
Sorry.
Look, I think people across the country are looking for solutions to their problems. I happen to believe that the two-party system in this country broke down when the Republican Party nominated somebody in Donald Trump who just was wholly unfit for the office of the presidency. But look, my hope is that we can come together and work together, at least in Congress, to address these issues that people face. And look, we have a strong and vibrant democracy, despite some efforts in the other direction. Voters proved that last Tuesday. And I really believe that any member of Congress who fails to address the issues that Americans care about today, which is the fact that they feel their lives are increasingly unaffordable. If you're not addressing those issues, the voters will throw you out in November of 2026. And I've tried to warn my congressional colleagues, especially folks on the other side of the aisle, about that. It remains to be seen whether they're going to heed that advice.
All right, Virginia Congressman James Walkinshaw, we appreciate your time this morning. We'll see you back on the Hill. I know you're close, so you never really left the area, but we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much.